Welcome to the second part of our candidate Q&A, this time for our Vice President Education and Welfare candidates. If you've just joined us, welcome to Winchester Student Union's Officer Elections. My name is Tiff Burnett and I'm the Student Engagement Manager at Winchester Student Union, and I'm also the Deputy Returning Officer for the elections this year. So this is part of our 4-part pre-recorded Q&A with all your candidates, so do be sure to check out our other 3 videos. We've just heard from your presidential candidate, and after this video we'll be releasing the Q&A for our Vice President Activities and Services candidates, followed by your Student Officer candidates. So next up we have your Vice President Education and Welfare candidates. So the Q&A session this evening will give candidates an opportunity to answer questions which have all been either pre-submitted by our members through our Ask a Candidate online form or drawn from our Union Big Survey. So before we start the speeches, here are all of the candidates running for the role of Vice President Education and Welfare this year. So we have Tanis Best, Sal Fox, and we also have R.O.N running as a candidate in all of our elections. This stands for Reopen Nominations, and you can choose to vote for R.O.N as your first, second or third preference in this election. It's important to note in our elections here at Winchester Student Union that we use a single transferable vote system, allowing you to rank the candidates in order of your preference when you cast your vote. So when you're deciding how to vote, make sure you're not just deciding who your favourite candidate is, but also who your second and third preferences are. So for the Q&A, the order for candidates to answer the questions has been chosen at random. So candidates, your first question is, what do you consider to be the most pressing need in terms of student welfare, and how do you plan on addressing it? So first of all, Sal, if you could answer that question.
I would say probably student safety and students' physical well-being. It's easy to think of Winchester as being like quite a small, safe city, but there are issues that we do need to highlight to students when they first arrive on campus. And I think providing advice on guidance for new students on sort of how they can keep themselves safe around campus, and also if they have any concerns about new arising issues, that we have an open, safe space for students to come and just to freely say if there are any risks they feel, whether this be around the city or whether this be events that are held on campus. I feel that physical well-being connects so closely to mental health well-being, which I say is like the second, but obviously not as less important. They're still both the same. But the impact that this can give on students' mental health can shape their entire university experience. Obviously, the most important thing being the students' education, their degrees, the reason they come to university, as it's found through surveys that the most common reason for students to drop out or to finish their studies early is through students' mental health. So I feel that creating a physically safe environment, a place where students' mental health is nourished, looked after, will provide us with a successful rate of students who are deciding that actually this is my safe space, this is where I need to be, this is where my education is going to be flourished.
Thank you, Sal. Tanis.
I completely agree with what Sal is saying. Physical safety is so important, especially sort of in the last year or so. I want to add on about the mental health, because I do believe mental health is on the rise, especially with cost of living and very distressing things in the media as well, and the rise of media use. How I would like to address it is to promote our wellbeing services at the uni and the advice centre, just so students don't feel alone in this. We completely know how they feel, and they don't have to hide it or sit in silence about it. And going on from this, maybe putting on with the recharge days, adding on special things with it, or maybe even adding therapy dogs as a special event, so they can just come up to the lounge, the terrace bar, just have an hour or so with some dogs, just so it's just a serotonin boost and they feel happier in themselves.
Lovely. So candidates, your next question is, how will you work to engage and represent all student demographics and underrepresented student groups within the education and welfare zones, ensuring all students are heard and valued? Tanis, if you could start us off.
Of course. I mean, I would like to do special focus groups, just to get a real understanding of their needs and what they want out of the union and the university, because as someone who I don't consider myself from an underrepresented group, I don't totally understand, and I don't think it's very fair for me to say they need this, they need that, because I'm coming from a completely different place that they are. So I think even if in these focus groups they want different events in the vault, or even new activities during Freshers, like the Freshers Week, I just think that'd be so crucial just to get their input. Yeah, just because I can't speak for them.
Thanks, Tanis. Sal, what's your response to that question?
I agree exactly with everything that Tanis is saying. I think when we're providing a space where students know that they're supported in these focus groups, that's an idea that I also have, but then to also have follow-up sessions from these groups so that students know that they're not just giving their opinions and then it's just out into the air and it's just there, it's going to be lost. I feel like when we have these groups, there needs to be updates, there needs to be contact. That's the most important thing. When students know that things are getting done, when they're getting the results that they can see, then they feel like they're going to be the ones like represented. Again, like Tanis, I can't really speak for underrepresented students. So I feel like where students feel that there are gaps to be filled, they can be the ones to speak out and have a voice and be and have trust in us that changes are going to be made if they feel that they are underrepresented.
Lovely, thanks, Sal. So your next question is submitted from a PhD student who wants to know specifically, how will you represent voices from postgraduate research students? Sal, if you could start us off.
I think that the Rooted in Research scheme that we have going on at the moment, where postgraduate research students can come in and they can give feedback, they can discuss their projects, and they also receive a little plotted part. That's difficult to say. When they have little events like that, I feel like that's just like, it shows the warming community of Winchester and how we feel that everyone's like voices do need to be heard. But I do think this needs to be expanded further by taking any feedback that they have directly higher. Obviously, they can feel like being a PGR student is quite a lonely experience. They can feel quite on their own. They're quite individual because they are just sort of pushed the boat out a little bit. Sort of, this is your own research. But if they feel like that they're like their journey, even though it's as unique as it is, if they have connections through other students, and if they have the opportunities for like anything that they need to get changed, if they have that trust in us that things can be taken higher, like directly as soon as issues arise, then I feel like they're going to feel even closer to the student experience, even if they don't necessarily feel like sort of average student that we have. But I feel like it's really important that they do, and that there isn't just your average student. Everyone's one and everyone's like together. As cheesy as it sounds.
And Tanis?
No, that is completely the thing. I completely agree. Winchester should feel like a community. Even if you're a postgrad, undergrad, it should be that community feeling for anyone coming in. So I completely agree with the points Sal has made. One of the points I would like to add is like the events like the Rooted in Research, maybe once a month have a space, maybe the Learning Cafe or anywhere. We can bring the postgrad students in and offer them a hot drink, coffee, and a place where they can chat with our advisor, or just so they can speak about their worries so they still feel included, because I know it can be a stressful time for them, and to feel isolated would not help with that stress. So if we can build a community for them as well, so they still feel involved.
Thank you, candidates. So your next question is, how will you ensure that our STARs, so our student academic representatives, are effectively trained and supported throughout the academic year to represent student views? Tanis?
Of course. So I will take the STARS feedback from this academic year and in turn work out a training scheme for them, so we can train them alongside the feedback and if they have any thoughts for the new academic year. Looking at key points from the feedback previously, looking at how holding the university's high standards for assessments and assignments, and also how we can, going back to that community feeling of PhD students, commuting students, how can we get them involved as well? Also, I would like to work with the stars on reducing bullying and toxicity on courses, especially with the rise of anonymous Instagrams where people can put thoughts and really nasty things about other students. I just would like to work on the stars and how we can train them to see things in their classes, with their cohort and their classmates, and how we can provide a safer community for them.
Thanks, Tanis. Sal, what's your response to that question?
I completely agree with everything that Tanis has said. In terms of like the stars training, I feel like from the start, making sure that they are as fun and collaborative as possible. Obviously, being a star is quite a big responsibility, especially if you're a first year student coming in, you're just getting to grips with the university experience, and now you feel like you have a little bit of responsibility surrounding your course. But just showing them the importance of like the voice that they have, and sort of not letting any of them sort of slip through the cracks, and making them feel like, you know, their opinions that they have on their courses won't matter. So like sort of them thinking, why would I give that if they don't think it matters? And also expanding like the reward system that's in place. I know we're quite prone to giving out sort of like freebies with hoodies for their work, but expanding this by with the like the social events, making sure that they're as sort of collaborative as possible, and that the feedback systems that we have in place are concrete, and that the trainings that we have as well, as Tanis mentioned, with the with like the bullying issues that we have, anonymous forms pages online, and just sort of mitigating these from the start, and just saying that anything that comes up with these sort of things, how you discuss this with students, how if people are having situations happening with this on their courses, how stars can approach this when they're approached by other students, and just showing them just how rewarding their work can be as a star.
Thanks both. So your next question this evening is, how can we continue to grow awareness of and access to our Student Union Advice Centre, ensuring that students know the support available and how to access it? Sal, if you could start us off.
So I think for me personally, when I first started as a student, I knew fairly sort of soon what the Advice Centre was. I knew sort of, you know, I knew that, you know, it existed, and I saw sort of logos and campaigning around it. And so the actual branding of it itself was incredible. But I feel like for me, there was also always that fear of sort of approaching it, and sort of taking steps further if needed. So I feel like more than just it being a brand, there needs to be like more detail when it comes to advertising of sort of what it offers. Yes, we have like sort of the categories surrounding sort of like, well, you see the advertising surrounding like well-being advice, you see education, and it's just kind of great, but what advice do they offer? Is it going to be a system? Because I feel like some students can feel like in systems like that in place, they can go to and they just get, you know, advice that's just going to be a bit washed over, a bit sort of, oh, just try your best kind of thing. But no, we need like systems in place where students are, you know, ready and open to receive sort of advice on changes that they could like potentially look at, and just ways that they can expand their student experience. One of the main things around this, I think, is surrounding like the cost of living crisis. I think with the changes in the maintenance loan that we're going to see coming through, I feel like the Advice Centre is going to see quite a few calls for advice on how to sort of help your maintenance loan, how to make it stretch further. And so that can be, we can have sort of like themed sort of like focused times on like different events, sort of surrounding like, oh, this week we're going to look at ways to spread the cost of your maintenance loan. This week we're going to look at sort of maybe, you know, advice on how to do a food shop, sort of like really specific sort of simple things like that.
And Tanis?
Yeah, so actually adding on to that point as well, I think it would be really crucial to highlight using social media. So Instagram, I know a lot of students use Instagram and access all the university and the student union accounts on there, but also TikTok. So maybe we can do a series on TikTok, like Sal has said, highlighting these. So maybe like it can be like a quick snippet of like, here's a budget, how you can do that. But with the advice centre itself, I think it'd be really crucial to highlight it on Instagram, but also maybe having a thing like meet the advisors, because I know people have anxiety if they won't book in with someone if they don't know them. I know I'm the same. I sometimes if I haven't met a person, I go like, oh, I don't know. But if maybe we can have a Instagram highlight or like a story post just saying this is our advisor, just so then they know and they can see the friendly face before they book in. And also with the cost of living, I think more promotion of the food cupboard on social media, but also perhaps a food drive. So we can get teachers, lecturers, students to all donate, even if it's like canopies, that sort of thing. And so we can start replenishing this food cupboard. And then, because obviously with cost of living going higher and higher, more students aren't able to afford food. So I think this would be really crucial for well-being of the students.
Lovely. Thanks both. So your next question is kind of a scenario-based question. So you've just come out of a meeting where you've advocated for students in relation to the provision of out-of-hours support services. You feel that this is a vital issue for students. However, it seems that this is unlikely to move forward. What are your next steps? Hannes, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, of course. So I would take a step back after this meeting and just think, okay, what can I do to help or get the union to do? So obviously, getting out of hours services, you have to look at the budgets, funding, but also the employment of the student service advisors if they're willing to stay after hours. If this is not possible, then I would look at the resources we have online. So, for example, Shout, Nightline, Samaritans, and promote these services as just a thing for students to access in the meantime while they can't speak to the student services team. Yeah, I think that's like the best thing.
Thank you. And Sal?
I think the important thing when we look at feedback given from students is to be incredibly realistic. Services like this are sort of really like well used by students, but if you have a situation where you feel like you're trying and pushing for a campaign and you feel like that it's not really going anywhere, I feel like the main thing is communication with students. It's really often that students give advice on things, or they give something that they feel like they're like really like passionate about and they'd really like to see, such as like out of hours services. But it's important for them to feel like that they're not left in the dark after giving like their feedback on something, and also not to sort of like throw a negative on it, but if it comes down to budgeting, if it comes down to just logistics, that something like this just isn't feasible for students, is also really important, as Tannis mentioned, that students do make use of things like Nightline, like Shout, that those resources are available there, and maybe look at sort of mitigating those, sort of seeing how they be sort of like changed to benefit, to fit these students for what they like. So just kind of changing what's already in place, promoting that, making that as best as it can be, to fill in a gap that might be left due to sort of logistical reasons. That it would be a shame if something like this didn't go ahead. Is actually quite a nice idea. Sort of carry on forward.
Lovely. So candidates, your last question this evening is: timely release of assessment information and the availability of support to succeed are routinely noted as areas of concern for students. What would you do to enhance this aspect of student experience? Sal, if you could start us off.
I'd say having systems in place where there's actual deadlines for lecturers to meet, there's actual things in place for each assessment that students receive, every bit of feedback that they get is fitting in to like a specific same consistent pattern. So students, when they have an assessment, are sort of more aware that like with the sort of technical side, so they can then focus on the assessment itself and then not have to worry about, am I doing this right? Am I going to get it in on time? Am I actually going to get feedback on it? Or am I just putting in all this hard work for have to wait for about 3 months to get an assessment back? I feel like personally, from my perspective on my course, I haven't felt like personal issues surrounding sort of like releases of assessments, like the availability of getting extensions, if that's needed to students. So I feel like that would be another thing that I have to reach out and speak to students about, and would be happy to, because I feel like as assessments like are being, you know, the overarching thing of your degree, that's, you know, that's the results of your hard work. They're really, really important, as you know. And if there's areas of concern sort of surrounding like a student's submission of something, or they're, you know, waiting, to contact those directly, to sort of work out issues, and that lecturers and sometimes like examiners are kept to the same standard that students are, that they have the same expectations of. There are deadlines, there are things that we need to meet as one. So if everyone's putting in the same work, then we can benefit.
And Tanis?
Yeah. So what I would do is I'd work on what would need to be improved. So whether it's feedback being released later, then we work with the faculties involved, holding them accountable, saying we need, like Sal says, we need this deadline. So so students know, right, I've got 2 weeks and I should have my feedback back. Also, I'd like to add in the need of proper availability of marking criteria, so students can know what they are. So in an essay-based assessment, they know, right, if I write this and write that, then I should be getting a 2-1. Because I know some courses haven't got those readily available until after the feedback's been given out. So I think that would be really beneficial for our students, to have that when they start their assessments. Further, I would add that tutorials should be readily available, so students can discuss feedback or before the assessment, so they really have a good understanding of what they need to do, whether it be before or what they can do in the future.
Lovely. So thank you so much to both of our candidates for Vice President Education and Welfare. If you want to hear more from any of the candidates or check out their manifestos, we've posted a link to each of the candidate pages on our website in the description of the video. So please do be sure to check out their manifestos listed on their page for more. A reminder that voting opens tonight at 9 p.m, so do check your Unimail email where you will receive a direct link to cast your vote, or you can visit our website winchesterstudents.co.uk/vote. So that draws us to the close of part 2 of our candidate Q&A. Do stick around, as we will be uploading part 3 very shortly, where you'll be hearing from our Vice President Activities and Services candidates.